Welcome everyone, Questini here with the community rankings for the Dark Elf, Legendary Lords, and Total War Warhammer 3. In last place we have Crone Hellebron, and you gotta feel a bit for Hellebron because she's actually a much stronger Legendary Lord than people give her credit for, and her campaign isn't quite awful. It's just people dislike her because they dislike having to deal with the slave mechanic in general. Quite a few people do dislike the mechanic, and they dislike having to spend extra slaves just to fill up a bar over here. It really isn't that bad, and you do have some significant advantages over here with Hellebron. You start with the Death Axe, so you get replenishment instantly. You start with a tier 2 city as opposed to a tier 1 city, looking at you, Malekith. And you have a pretty good province over here that you do have access to. It's more of a perception thing rather than anything else, and I guess she's just not really the most exciting character from a Dark Elf point of view, but she is certainly very strong in battle, and she's strong in the campaign map as well when you're considering. I mean, she has regeneration as a skill, and let me tell you, when I'm fighting Dark Elves in this particular area, let's say as a Leafanar, I'm not afraid of Malekith. Malekith is whatever. I'm afraid of Hellebron because she'll take this entire province and then spam Dark Shards continuously against me. And here's the thing. Morathi can have an opponent in Astankia. Hellebron has no such opponent. You might think, well, Valkia can present such an opponent, or Sigvald can. Let me say this, like in the vast majority of campaigns, Hellebron fights both Valkia and Sigvald and wipes the floor with both of them at the same time. That's the kind of character we have here under AI control. So she's quite difficult to deal with when you're fighting her. But yeah, I mean, her character design, just her design in general, is not really appealing to a lot of people, and I guess that's the reason why she's the lowest on the list, by far. Like, she got 5% of the vote. In the second worst placed, we have Rakarth, who is in Lustria, and I could stop saying anything over there. Because, to be quite honest with you, Lustria just sucks. Bad terrain design, huge distances, jungle slowing down, all those kind of issues combined. And also just really questionable design over here in putting 3 Legendary Lords, actually 4 Legendary Lords of the quote-unquote Order Tide right next to each other. So Azamundi, Jan Bo, Marcus Wolfhard, and Albrecht. Like, GCA. I thought you guys really wanted to move from the Order Tide. Well, welcome to the Lustrian Order Tide. The problem for Rakarth is that, beyond the inherent issues of Lustria, Dark Elves are the kind of race that do want to fight a lot of battles, because they want to get those slaves. The problem is that, because you're in Lustria, you end up fighting less battles than in every other Dark Elf campaign, maybe even put together, which slows down your campaign pacing by quite a significant amount. And that is the inherent problem that Rakarth does have in his campaign. Also, focusing a campaign on beasts just doesn't necessarily work quite as well as you might think. See, the problem with beasts, yes, they can be effective, like get the Feral Stegodon and just curb stomp everything that's in your path. Or a lot of the things that are in your path, to be certain. But the problem with beasts is they're just expensive units compared to other units that you can get. And sure, a couple of them can make it work, but the entire stacks of these guys, not really worth it. Also, while you can get Karen Carr in this campaign, provided you complete the objective that you do get, the problem with Karen Carr is, like, enjoy confederating a faction and then having to deal with a Leafanar one way or another. It is a bit annoying. I'm sure there's some way to cheese it, but it isn't really a great experience. And out of the 2 Legendary Lords that do have that possibility, let me just say that Rakarth is in a significantly weaker position than Lokhir, because he just has fewer slaves, a weaker economy, and he'll gain money slower. Also, he'll complete the objective much slower as well. Potentially, depends on how it plays out. And number 4, we have Malus Darkblade. And oh boy, this campaign, it's dull as dirt. Like, the problem with Malus Darkblade is he is a one-man Doomstack, undeniably so. He starts possessed as a demon, and he has a black arc, so that is a significant level of power. Undeniably so. And he also gets ability of giving up Hag Grief, which he starts with, for 20,000 coin. I would take the money, because you are going to certainly use all of that money, because you can use the elixir to get an absurd level of growth and corruption in all provinces, and get loyalty. Like, it disables your demonic possession, but you don't need demonic possession, suffice to say. And I say that, I don't say that lightly, I'm quite serious. I'm quite serious because, quite frankly, with respect to all of that, demonic possession is not necessary in this campaign. Now, like, who's gonna oppose you? That you would actually need to use it. Epidemius? Daniel? Trog? I mean, Sigval could be it, they could do it, but you could just click the button to allow full possession at one point or another. I think also his campaign design doesn't just necessarily make sense. Like, oh, you get a bunch of missions for Tsarkhan that give you a bit of possession, which is irrelevant, and give you some money, which, considering you start with 20k at the beginning of the campaign, is also irrelevant. So his campaign mechanics are just utterly pointless in every single way. You do get the right of the War Master, which feels like it should belong to Rakarth as opposed to Malus Darkblade, because having a high-end army of beasts is really something that screams Rakarth. Enjoy dealing with the early game with this. Like, this is basically your I win button. Like, whenever you just want to obliterate anyone, like if someone from the east is showing up to try and defeat you, it's like, just spawn this and obliterate them. And here's the thing, these are actual units. This is not a disposable army. So yeah, like, Malus Darkblade has more of a Rakarth campaign, or what it should be in some ways, than actual Rakarth. But it is a fairly boring and dull campaign in a lot of ways as well. Like, you're just, like, having a really powerful lord, all well and good. Having a lord that is one-man Doomstack is all well and good. But what's the challenge in this campaign in any way, shape, or form? What's the fun aspect of this campaign? Because all you're just gonna do in this campaign is march from where you are all the way over here, beat everyone up along the way, try and confederate both Malekith and Hellebron, and then just obliterate Ulthuan, which is ultimately your long campaign objective as well. And also, it's kind of hilarious that the guy who literally starts in the cast Wasteland doesn't have Wasteland as a suitable climate. At least he has Ulthuan. Yeah, not really the best campaign design. And really, a lot of people do think Malus Darkblade is not so great as a campaign. At number 3, it is Morathi, the Hag Queen of the Dark Elves. Morathi has a really powerful campaign with a lot of long-term potential. It used to be that you might have had to deal with Mazdamundi, but now you can make him one of your best allies, or wipe him out and sell all the territory to Yanbo and become really good friends with him. See, here's the interesting thing about the Dark Elves. The Dark Elves are hated to a certain extent by a lot of races, be it Chaos or Order races, but they're not so hated that you can't overcome that minus 40 aversion or a bit higher than that and make significant diplomatic gains. And Morathi is the best out of the Dark Elves from that particular perspective. Because of her starting position, the power of her economy, the Slaaneshi corruption she does have, which further improves her economy and also gives her control, which is actually quite useful to have in a Dark Elven campaign right now. She has one of the best starting provinces in the entire game because of the Sanctum of Quintex. So she can actually make more money than all the other Dark Elves. Like, just put a bunch of economic buildings with Ancient City of Quintex and you end up with a ridiculous sum of money. And Dark Elves already have pretty good growth, but add Morathi's insane level of growth for the Sanctum, and you can grow this province even faster. This campaign is honestly ridiculous. Like in 60 turns, you can control all of Nagrand, all of Ulthuan, and ally half the freaking world. I am not exaggerating in that respect in any way, shape, or form. The only race that actually hates you are the High Elves, because they have a -100 aversion. Though there is ways around that particular aversion anyway by capturing the Corrupted Flame of Asuryan. And because of where you start, you can just load up all your troops via naval invasion and beeline it for Lokhir and then eliminate Tyrion before he actually becomes a problem. You do need to eliminate all the High Elven factions, all the major High Elven factions in the game in order to achieve victory, but that is pretty easy. In fact, it's actually harder to deal with Hellebron one way or another than it is to deal with the High Elves. Though, to be fair, you can also confederate Hellebron if you play your cards right from a diplomatic perspective. So, great campaign, great Legendary Lord. You get more mages than anyone else. You get more powerful mages than anyone else as well. Like, you can get the first Sorceress, which gives you hero capacity for mages, but crucially gives you hero recruitment for sorceresses in all provinces, which is pretty damn powerful. The downside is that you are going to get less Khainite assassins, and it's harder to recruit Hargonef executioners in this campaign compared to others. So there are certainly some downsides in this particular campaign, but like the upsides more than make up for it. It is quite absurd. I admit I am a bit surprised this campaign wasn't voted higher. Like, I can understand the number 1 choice, but the number 2 choice, that's a different discussion. Because at number 2, we have Malekith, the Witch King of Nagrand. His campaign starting situation isn't really the best over here with, well, the Rakdo Gorge, as well as the mount over here being mountains, as well as having a couple of other mountains over here in the Iron Coast. That said, while losing the Altar of Ultimate Darkness might feel painful, in truth, allying Grombrindle in this campaign is very doable. Because, see, if you're playing a Grombrindle campaign, you do want to wipe out Malekith. But if you're playing a Malekith campaign, you can be best buddies with Grombrindle, wipe the grudge, beat up the elves, the High Elves to be particular. What I dislike about this campaign, while certainly I understand why it's number 2, like the 25% upkeep benefit for Dark Shards in particular is very significant. But what I dislike are a couple of things. One, I dislike the fact that the short campaign victory condition forces you to deal with Tyrion, so it's actually going to be harder to accomplish that. Though, to be honest, the short campaign victory condition doesn't really quite matter all that much if you're playing a Dark Elf campaign. Though, certainly the recruit rank is nothing to sneeze at. But you can ally Grombrindle and secure the north, and then, you know, get the confederation with Hellebron if you play your cards right, and as well as confederating all of these minor Dark Elfin factions, again, if you're playing your cards correctly in this particular situation. There's so many ways. Your first priority would actually be to wipe out Grond in order to get this wonderful province that does also have a gold mine over here and gives you the hero recruitment of sorceresses and hero capacity, as well as Winds of Magic benefits. Valkia will try and do that before you, but you can beat her to the punch partly because you're actually closer to it than she is. So this campaign can work. It can work very well. I would not necessarily focus on his magic skill tree, though it's certainly very powerful, but rather on his melee skill tree. He is really good in combat, and he also has a bunch of benefits over here through Tyrant or War Leader. Really, you can get minus 10% upkeep for all armies, as well as getting other benefits like, you know, Lord Recruit rank, faction-wide, casualty replenishment for your army, income from looting and sacking settlements plus 100%. Or you can go for growth construction benefits as well as diplomatic relations for Dark Elves. Personally, I would go with War Leader versus Tyrant, but both of them are pretty viable choices in this particular campaign. It's not quite the same as the minus 30% upkeep that Morathi gets for her army, nor does he have the same kind of overall power as Morathi, but he is the generic lord of the Dark Elves. And while I think he could be made more interesting, it is a campaign that does work. Not the greatest from my perspective when it comes to Malekith. I'd actually rather play Hellebron and Confederate Malekith, because the faction benefits, they don't matter as much as you might think, really, in all things considered. I mean, yeah, the diplomatic relations sounds great until you realize that you can trivialize that, confederations in other ways. And finally, at number 1 is Lokhir Fellheart. What could be said about Lokhir that hasn't already been said 100 times? He starts in one of the best areas of the campaign, but he has a way of getting back to Nagrand and Ulthuan. Or he can go to Lustria if you want to show Rakarth who's the best Dark Elf Lord. But really, in this campaign, you have a significant level of flexibility. Remember that diplomacy point that I made about Morathi? Yeah, you can use that kind of diplomacy ability over here. I mean, the most natural path would be to ally Snitch, but forget Snitch. Let's ally Xiaoming, Miaoying, and Gelt and start pumping out the Hellstorm rocket batteries with all of them. Or the flying Hellstorm rocket batteries if we're talking about Cafe. It should be said that Cafe, if you let the Cafe factions grow, they become a massive threat to everyone around them. So you don't even need to defeat Emmerich in this campaign. You can just ally Xiaoming, sell him some territory, and just say, you see Gorst? Wipe him out. You see Emmerich? Wipe him out. And he will. Believe it or not, he actually will. It will take some time, but he can certainly achieve that kind of victory. It's quite ludicrous because his auto-resolve is so significant. So a lot of diplomatic possibilities over here. And then another thing to point out is you have more Black Arcs in this campaign than any other Dark Elf campaign combined. Because every major port, so every provincial capital that has a port in it increases your Black Arc capacity. So that means, like over here, I'm sitting with 2 in Cafe and 1 in Karen Car. I could have even gotten a 4th one had I not sold the Blacklight Tower, but there gets a point where you just kind of want to save your money. But speaking about money, you get a lot of money in this campaign compared to everyone else. The reason is related to rights. You don't have the sacking benefit that Malekith has. What you have is actually better. Because you have, of course, like every other Dark Elf, you have the Sacrifice of Cain. So income from post-battle loot, casualties post-battle, all that, right? But then you have the Sacrifice of Anaf Rema, which gives you 50% income from sacking settlements and 20% campaign movement range, on top of buffing your Black Arc Corsairs, making them significantly stronger in battle, as well as buffing Black Arc growth. Which means you can get access to all of the heroes and all of the units in the Dark Elf roster faster. You also have a special Black Arc over here with the Blessed Dread, which gives you further benefits to income from sacking settlements and recruit rank to Black Arc Corsairs faction-wide, which are kind of one of the main units you want to use. I've said this before and I'll say it again. The Dark Elves really want to use Black Arcs and Black Arc Corsairs to maximum effect. They are the naval dominant faction because the current Black Arcs were actually built on the Vampire Coast Horde armies. I mean, Black Arcs were in Warhammer 2 since the beginning, but the way they changed them was based on shipbuilding. Except your shipbuilding is significantly better than the Vampire Coast. Well, it's kind of hilarious that Lokhir starts a war with the Vampire Coast faction and just beats the crap out of them. With the exception of the Death Guard units that they have. By the way, this is the Immortal Empire's extended map. You do have sea lanes available in this campaign that will take you to various places in this particular campaign and really allow you a lot of campaign flexibility that you may not have in other campaigns. I mean, okay, Morathi and Malekith can take advantage of that, but like, yeah, Lokhir is great. The one downside is mountain climate is uninhabitable, which is a bit of a shame, but outside of that, you do have a good chunk of territory to play with. On top of that, because we're not finished, you get upkeep minus 50% for Black Arc Corsairs, fear for them permanently for his army, loyalty for new recruits, campaign movement range, various other benefits for Black Arc Corsair units, as well as more Black Arc growth faction-wide. So again, better benefits. And more bombardment abilities with Black Arcs, which they have by default, as well as lower recruit rank faction-wide, as well as reducing the slave cost for both the sacrifice of Anathema and sacrifice to Mathlin. Now the Mathlin one is a bit ridiculous because we don't have that. It's a bit weird with respect to that. I gotta say that it's mentioning this. But all the same, you have a ludicrous level of benefits, you have a very strong early game, and while I think Morathi is better at empire building, to be certain, the sheer map possibilities that you do have over here are ridiculous. And far more so than any other campaign, because you could say, well, Malus Darkblade has a dual start. Yeah, your dual start, it's not a dual start. You can get Karankar later on. It does create problems with Alifanar, who does hate you, but if you can defeat Alifanar, you're going to steamroll in a way that very few other campaigns can. Again, if in a long campaign Morathi is better, Malekith has his own benefits, Malus Darkblade certainly has his own benefits as well, but like, yeah, when I started playing Dark Elves in Warhammer 3, this ended up being the best campaign. Like, I ended up liking Morathi more because of our long-term potential, but that long-term potential is still present in Lokhir's campaign, just not quite in the same way. And that would be it. Questine signing out. Let me know what you guys think about all of this, and see you next time. Well, it was based on your votes, purely on your votes with this one. Next up, High Elves, most likely.